pleasure to be invited, and I have to say that this conference is the most interesting conference I've been to in decades, I think. So I was asked to talk about surgery and sex, and this is a huge subject, but I thought I would start with sexual harassment since it's been so much in the media. Now, sexual harassment is not confined to surgery in medicine, of course. Just recently, or just last year, Professor John Kersley, who is a prominent oncologist in Sydney, pleaded guilty to drugging and sexually assaulting a female trainee in his home in November 2013. He'd invited her there to discuss her career. 2 years later, just a couple of weeks ago, he's now put forward a bizarre defense that he had no erotic feelings for her, and so the whole process is being dragged out further, and the agony for her goes on, and there's no closure. Her career, of course, has been irreparably damaged. Surgery itself, though, has a lot of conditions that are conducive to sexual harassment. So it's a very lucrative profession, and with money comes power. It's dominated by men, and there is an extremely hierarchical structure, so that in order to move up the ladder, to move on to the next spot, you have to please the person above you. Now, the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2013 showed that now 60% of our medical students are women, and yet only a third of specialists are women. For some reason, women prefer endocrinology and pathology, but half of our O&G specialists are women, and O&G, of course, is a surgical specialty and is a very challenging surgical specialty involving a lot of after-hour and emergency work, which makes a mockery of the criticism of women that they don't like hard work, which I've often heard said. However, the other specialties in surgery are far less well represented by women, and the worst being, of course, orthopedic surgery. So why don't women choose surgery? First of all, women are largely invisible in surgery at high positions, so only 10% of consultant surgeons are women. When Professor Julie Freischlag became chair of surgery at Johns Hopkins University in the States, during her tenure, the percentage of women there increased to 40%, which is the largest that there has ever been in the world. But that is, she herself remarked that she went for a job of chair of surgery in 2002, and the dean who had interviewed her said to her afterwards, "I'm sorry, but I just can't appoint a woman." Can you imagine if he had said that about a black African American? "I'm sorry, I just can't appoint a black guy or a Muslim." Can you imagine the uproar that there would have been about that? Women are used to being denigrated and patronized, and it's almost taken for granted. So not only do we not get any encouragement to go into surgery, and I can't tell you the number of women who've told me that they've been told by their male surgical supervisors, "Go home and have kids." So they're not encouraged in, but then it's a hostile environment. An operating theatre that's full of men is a very macho environment. Men like to yell and scream and throw abuse around. They make sexist jokes. There are lewd jokes. So it's not comfortable for women, and it's almost behaviour that is expected of male surgeons. In fact, I mean, I know several male surgeons in Sydney who pride themselves on this behaviour, and it's sort of tolerated with a kind of fondness. Boys will be boys. It's just him. Nobody takes too much offence. If a woman, however, objects to this behaviour, she gets told, "If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen," which seems a particularly stupid analogy, since I can't imagine any male surgeon spending any time in a kitchen. Communication for women, as you go up the ladder, becomes more and more difficult. women are expected to be nice, much nicer than men. And then that leads to a catch-22 situation. If you're nice, then it's assumed that you're not capable of a leadership position. However, if you're not nice, if you are demanding, if you are critical, then you're criticized for being a nasty bitch. And it's women who get far more criticized for bad behavior than senior men in surgery. Then there is the family issue, and this is a huge issue. And women trainees see that there are long hours and don't see it as being family friendly. I think this is paradoxical in that men have families. Almost all male surgeons have families. In fact, a lot of them have two families because they've left the first wife for the taller, thinner model and are now on their second family. So you can have family and be a surgeon. This, however, is the deal breaker. Men can't do this, and it is an exhausting process. I've been through it twice. I've worked up until 4 weeks before delivery. And at the end of the process, of course, if you're lucky, you get a healthy one of these, and that is an almost more exhausting process. However, it takes two to have a family. So we're all taught, as we're in our education process, that merit is so important. The person who gets the highest mark is at the top. The person who does the most work should get the job. So we assume that merit is how you should get a job. It's a farce. Merit is decided by a group. A small group of men who decide what merit is, and in their eyes, merit is a white heterosexual male, largely. And the only difference that women can make in this process is by sex. So sex is a commodity, and women can use it. And I know of women who have been given prestigious jobs in Australia by certainly submitting to sex and then being rewarded with the job. There are some women that have sexual relations and then marry the guy. And then that usually means that they lose their career because they, of course, are then relegated to home and hearth. There are some who continue with their career, but his career is always the most important. And so we have this. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. And most of the time, however, sex doesn't work. It's used by men for because they can. And if you indulge in sexual relations, you're the one that loses. So, for example, I know of a woman who, and men use their power to seduce young women in this system. So she got involved in a sexual relationship with this powerful man in her first year as residency whatsoever. As usual, this man is happily married with children, and after about 3 months, she became uncomfortable and withdrew from the relationship. He has spent the last 15 years trying to stop her progression in her career, which, just is ridiculous. So I warn all of my medical students that they should not take part in the whole thing. It doesn't work for you. Up until 2008, I began to be very upset about the way my female trainees were being treated by surgeons, and so started writing letters to the college. Up until 2008, this is what the Code of Conduct for the Royal College of Surgeons says. The surgeon should recognize that intimate relationships with trainees pose potential role conflicts. So they were basically admitting that this often happens and that it's okay, but it's a bit uncomfortable. After a particular letter that I wrote asking for advice about what I should ask my trainees when they were offered sex for a traineeship, for a position. They've changed it. And in fact, you can't find any reference to this on the internet at all. They've completely eradicated it, but I have a hard copy of it. So they've changed it to this. Fellows should not seek or promote an intimate relationship with a trainee when the surgeon is involved with the trainee as supervisor, trainer, or educator. And that seems obvious, but it still occurs. So I think I've put forward the problems. The solutions I see are this. There have to be serious consequences for men who sexually harass our trainees. And this has to be not hidden away in a secret process. It has to be, our trainees need to see the consequences. There need to be serious adverse consequences for these men. In addition, hospital administrations need to get on board. Last year I was involved in a radio program, and a young physio phoned in. She had been working at a hospital, and a senior surgeon had taken a fancy to her and started off by sort of saying things like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here today, I'll have something nice to look at." But it had gradually ramped up to, essentially he was stalking her. And again, he was happily married with children. So she went to administration to say, "You have to stop this. This is really upsetting me. You have to stop it." Administration said to her, "You should be flattered. This man is really powerful. And anyway, he makes far too much money for the hospital, and you have to go." So she had to leave her job. There is talk about producing the black box in operating theatres. This has already been done in Toronto in Canada, and it's been done in the guise of improving medical safety. So everything that happens in the theatre is recorded. I'm told by my nurses that surgical behavior would change dramatically if they were being filmed. So I think that may well come. Finally, we need to stop punishing women for getting pregnant. We need to get pregnant. We need to have a new generation. And allowances need to be made for that. We also need to have far more equality between men and women in the home and hearth situation, because family is really, really important, and kids need both input from their mum and their dad. Thank you very much.